right, everyone, this is Vishal from EQUITY.GURU, and today we're continuing trading, technical trading 101, talking about support and resistance. And I'm sure you guys have heard this term many, many times, and all it is trading jargon for price floor and price ceiling. That's really all it is. In terms of resistance, it's an area where we expect to see a wall of sellers, and support or price floor is where we are expecting to see a wall of buyers. And here are just some, indicators of support and resistance. Probably seen all these images, very basic little outlines of how to read support and resistance. Once again, price floor for support, price ceiling for resistance. And how do we use these levels, right? So essentially, for a support level, you know that there's going to be a wall of buyers there. So a lot of people tend to buy at support. Alternatively, at resistance, because we know there's going to be a lot of sellers there, people tend to sell at resistance. Another way to use support and resistance is if you are in a trade, if you are long something, or if you are buying something, you're basically going to be looking at the resistance level as an area to take your profits, right? It's going to be maybe one of your take profit levels, just because you know there's going to be a wall of sellers there. If you're short selling something, you're probably going to be targeting a support level, right? Because you know there's going to be a wall of buyers there. So that's probably where you want to take your profits, and then maybe watch to see what price does, because you expect the buyers to step in and perhaps take us back up to resistance. So maybe it could be a time to play support as, going long something. But we'll talk about that because that's basically how a range will work. But a range is something we will discuss in a future video when we look at structures. A couple of rules that I recommend for looking at support and resistance. First of all, support and resistance is not necessarily one level, right? You're not going to say, oh, support is 44, 300, whatever, right? It's usually a zone. And as you can see here, I've drawn my support levels, not just targeting one level, but it's basically a zone. And I'm going to show you in the next video actually how to draw or a little secret to get really good support and resistance levels. But usually what happens is even numbers. So for example, 4,200, $1, $2, $5, $10, those levels tend to be very important support and resistance levels. So these even sort of numbers, I guess they just fit better, fit nicely. Gold right now, a lot of people are looking at resistance at 1,800 because it's such a nice number to look at, right? So I guess keep that in mind. These whole numbers tend to be areas where people like to draw support and resistance zones because it basically encompasses price levels that are just below it and just above it, as you can sort of see here with my support and resistance levels that I've drawn out here. Record highs. So for example, here are the S&P 500, 4,800. Record highs and record lows tend to be major support and resistance levels. So obviously for record highs, that's going to be a resistance level because obviously if markets break out, that's a new record, but they tend to see a bit of struggle before they do that. Same thing with record lows. When a stock is getting beat up or any asset is getting beat up, previous lows tend to be an area where the buyers will step in. Sometimes people call them bottom feeders, but they'll look at that and say, hey, this is an important support level because it's previous lows, record lows, and this is a good area to maybe enter because support will develop there. Another thing for drawing support and resistance levels, which I think is very, very important, is look for multiple touches. And again, in the next video, actually, I'm going to share with you guys a secret that I use to get really, really good in support and resistance levels. But you want to see areas which have multiple touches. I like to look at 3 or more touches. And I say that just because, you don't want to be that guy that says, oh, look, here's a support level, here is a resistance level, here's another one. You don't want to muddy up your chart with so many support and resistance levels. And believe me, I've seen that. You want to sort of look at areas that have multiple touches, more than, price areas that are nearby, and use that as your major support and resistance levels. And then finally, the most important thing about support and resistance levels is that when they are broken, they become the opposite. So here's a really good example of price action on the S&P 500. This 4,200 level has been support, and you can see these major candlestick patterns going back to March of 2022, where buyers were stepping in, taking us up to resistance at 4,600. The sellers then stepped in, taking us back down to support at 4,200. The buyers attempted to step in, but they failed to get us back above to the resistance level. And instead, we broke below support. We broke below 4,200. And when that happens, support, or what was once support, now becomes resistance. And you can see that we did pull back to hit 4,200, not as support, but now as resistance, and we sold off again. And you see a similar thing happen here with 3,900 support, where we broke below that support level, and then that support then became resistance. And obviously, the opposite is true as well. This was once resistance. We broke back above it, 3,900, and what was once resistance now became support. And you can see we're heading back to this major resistance level, 4,200, which became resistance because it was once support way back in May 2022. So you can look at support and resistance as price levels or price zones that see a lot of battles between bulls and bears. But really, it's just a fancy way to say price ceiling and a price floor. And this is just a good way to, have some levels to build some sense into these markets, rather than looking at, a chart that has no support and resistance, although I've drawn one out here. But it gives these charts, a bit of, what's the word I'm looking for? It gives it, a bit of some stability, I'd like to say, right? Rather than looking at something random like this, you draw support and resistance level, and you get, areas where prices can react, and you can work with those target levels. So if I'm looking here at the chart of Apple on the daily chart, automatically I'm drawing my support here, and you can see we actually had a breakout and a retest, and I'm going to be drawing my resistance here. And this comes from just, years of looking at charts. You can sort of build, or you can see these support and resistance levels a bit more clearer. But as I said, in the next video, I will be sharing, maybe it's a bit of a secret, but this simple strategy to draw really, really good and accurate support and resistance levels. But until then, draw away, folks. Draw these support and resistance levels on your charts. Give your charts these levels that you can interact with, and you can watch the buyers and sellers interact with. And until then, happy trading.